The U.S. is now the world's largest oil and gas producer, in part because of what's happening here in North Dakota, where advances in fracking have unlocked crude oil in the Bakken Shale Formation in the western part of the state. North Dakota is now producing more than 1 million barrels of oil a day. 10 years ago, there were fewer than 200 oil-producing wells in the Bakken. Now, there are more than 8,000.
They call it Boomtown, USA. This is where all the money is. It's crazy the amount of money that you can make here.
This rapid pace of development and the flood of workers coming here has given North Dakota the lowest unemployment rate in the U.S. But it's also raised questions over the dangers of working in the oil fields.
The more jobs you complete, the more money you make. The faster you complete them, the faster you can get to the next job. Let's say, you take your time. If you be safe, you are not, I bet you could cut my pay in half.
Faultline spent 6 months investigating some of the risks in North Dakota's oil fields and uncovered a dark side to the boom.
A lot of these workers come to North Dakota, get chewed up, and go home to recover. I get calls from attorneys in other states, and all ask the same question: what in the hell is going on up there?
Thousands of people from all over the country have been leaving home to seek work in the Bakken. One of them was a former Marine from Hazel Green, Alabama. We're in northern Alabama to meet the family of Dustin Payne, who, after serving 2 tours in the Marines, found a job as a welder in North Dakota. Hi, Scotty.
Hi.
Hey, I'm Josh Rushing with Faultlines. How are you?
Pretty good, man.
Good. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I was so proud of him when he joined the Marines. I'm very proud. Yeah.
It's interesting to see this kid in that picture. I imagine you guys must have been scared when he deployed to war twice.
Yeah, I was scared. But, when he came home from the wars and he was fine, I kind of quit worrying about him.
I knew going to North Dakota that, there were some dangers.
But nothing like that.
I never expected it, though. I was more worried about him when he was overseas than I was him being in North Dakota.
With a limited background in welding, 28-year-old Dustin Payne got a job as a welder for a pipeline construction outfit. After 7 months, he was offered a higher-paying job, welding for a much larger company, Nabors Completion and Production Services, a subsidiary of Nabors Industries. But a month into the job with Nabors, Dustin began raising red flags. So this is his phone?
This is his phone.
Wow. This is a text from Dustin to his girlfriend that says, "I'm going to be here all night. That's even if I can weld it." And he says, "I'm literally going to be welding something that's full of oil. Very dangerous." To which Jessica responds, "Maybe you should say something." And Dustin responds back that he did say something. And Jessica responds, "Yeah, that could kill you."
I'm sure it made everybody mad, but he wasn't going to put his life in danger.
While working in North Dakota, Dustin met Jessica Summers, the woman he planned to marry.
He would make comments about how he'd never thought about proposing to a girl, or he knew nothing about diamonds or rings. And one day he said, it's all about the clarity and the cut. And I thought, wow.
Oh man, he's a big old sop for that old lady, I tell you. He was. He loved that woman unconditional.
After serving 2 tours of duty with Dustin, DJ Allred followed his friend to North Dakota to find work.
One good thing about the oil field is you don't need a whole lot of experience. I didn't know anything about the oil field before I came. It was, can you work hard? Yeah, you're hired.
Dustin and DJ were roommates and often talked about the challenges of their jobs in the Bakken. One night, Dustin told DJ he was thinking of leaving Nabors.
I had a pretty rough day, and it was a tough one. A lot of things went wrong. I was actually talking to him about quitting, and he brought it up, and he's like, I'm thinking about quitting too. That day and the next day, he had his accident.
On October the 3rd last year, Dustin was welding on a tanker in the neighbor's yard when it exploded. He was rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead 5 days later. According to OSHA data, he was the 3rd Nabors Industries employee to die on the job in the Bakken since 2010.
On this backside, you're about to see where Dustin had his accident.
After he died, Dustin's family learned that he had been asked to weld on a saltwater tanker. Saltwater is a byproduct of the fracking process and can contain hydrocarbons, gases, and other explosive chemicals. The American Petroleum Institute guidelines recommend a strict safety protocol before a tank is welded on.
And you can see on the pictures from the explosion clear as day that all of those thief hatches are closed.
The explosion was so bad that Dustin's pickup was parked about 25 feet away. It blew out all the seals on his doors, blew out the sunroof on the truck.
Investigator Ross Rolshoven was hired by Dustin's family's attorney to look into the accident.
In Dustin's case, the top thief hatch was not open, so there was no natural draft ventilating through the top of the tank.
Look at this. Oh man, I didn't see that. You can still smell it up in here.
I think it was still test hot.
I believe so.
I wonder if that's where, in the area he was working.
Yeah.
What happened to Dustin, unfortunately, was very avoidable. The truck should have been put outside for 24 hours. We check for flammable gases and do that type of thing. And if it doesn't pass at that point, you let it sit outside for another 24 hours.
Kind of surprised to see it still sitting here. They probably just forgot and moved on about it. I mean, hell, the caution tape ain't even up. It's still just ragged, ranked, and ripped. Just someone to replace.
Like, where along the lines did somebody screw up? And it trickled down to Dustin, and now he's gone.
We're headed to Neighbors to try to find out why, in Dustin's case, it seems like basic safety regulations weren't followed. Why was he asked to weld on a tanker that was still explosive? So that was a dead end. We're told there's no management here that we can speak to. We're back on the chase again with the headquarters in Houston. Let's see if we can find someone there that'll talk to us.
Good morning, Neighbors.
Hi, good morning. My name is Josh Rushing. I'm calling from a show called Fault Lines. I'm up in Williston, North.
Over the course of 2 months, Fault Lines repeatedly tried to contact neighbors about their safety record and what happened to Dustin.
Our requests for an interview were declined.
The data varies, but Dustin Payne was one of at least 40 oil and gas industry workers who died on the job in North Dakota in the last 4 years. His death is currently being investigated by OSHA.
40 guys have died out there since about 2011. All sorts of accidents. We're looking for accountability. What part of that accountability lies with you in your office?
With me and with OSHA. You know, like I said, in the coldest terms, is our responsibility is to enforce the safety regulations.
Eric Brooks is the area director for OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. It's the federal agency charged with enforcing health and safety in the workplace. OSHA only has 9 full-time compliance officers for North Dakota, and according to some estimates, it would take decades for OSHA to inspect every workplace in the state.
While we have 9 people assigned to this area office, you know, we have the collective of OSHA's resources that we draw upon in order to make sure that we can improve and effectively enforce the OSHA standards.
I have never seen OSHA come out, but...
Wait, you've never seen OSHA at a site in 4 years?
No. Everybody knows about OSHA, and but everybody just does the bare minimum to get by, you know.
John was a friend of Dustin Payne's. John's not his real name. He asked us not to use that. He told us that he's worked in the oil fields in North Dakota for 4 years and has been on hundreds of well sites.
When things that happen, like what happened to your friend Dustin, does it make you step back and kind of decide how long you want to do this?
Yeah, I mean, well, you think about longevity. You look at all these safety violations, and you're just, when is it going to happen to me?
Oilfield work is some of the most dangerous in the country. OSHA tries to mitigate some of that danger by regulating worker safety issues. But there are surprising aspects of the industry that remain unregulated.
And what do you do?
Wireline.
So what does wireline mean?
Well, wirelines, we lower explosives underground to predetermined depths.
Wireliners lower explosives thousands of feet into the ground as the first step in the fracking process.
All these companies are using explosives, right?
Wireline, yes.
Is there any kind of general requirements for that?
There's no doctrinal training, if that's where you're getting at.
Yeah.
No, there's no doctrinal training. No.
To deal with explosives, major explosives?
No, you'll go, it's basically just prac app, you know, just going out to the field and me teaching you, you know, just, hey, this wire to this wire.
Workers like John are paid between 1% and 2% of the fee given to their employer to frack a well. So the faster they work, the more money they make.
I work a 20 and 10, 20 days on, 10 days off. The longest I've ever been out on a job site is 69 hours straight.
69 hours straight?
Yep.
So that sounds like it could be dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. It's a ticking time bomb, really. Something could have easily happened all the times that I've fell asleep in the crane while running it. Or let's just say I fall asleep and my hand hits some of the sticks and let's just say I lower the 6,000-pound load right on top of someone's head. You know, there's so many things that can happen.
Do you regulate how many hours someone can work?
OSHA does not. OSHA doesn't have hourly work limitations. OSHA does not. There are some
so
industries
that's a huge safety issue that doesn't fall under...
It doesn't fall under us. Unfortunately, we don't have regulations that say, you know, once you work X amount of hours, you have to have X amount of hours off.
Right.
There's a lot of things that I can do, and then there's things that I can highly recommend.
Any new OSHA regulations are devised at the national level in Washington, D.C., with input from interest groups. So even if there were a will to impose more regulations, they could take years to implement.
Is it out of control?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, the problem is it's hard to complain about the hours you work when you're making that kind of money. I mean, you got people coming up here, young, starting out making $100,000 a year, or you can be like myself who makes $200,000 a year. And so it makes it really hard to complain to management that you're working too many hours when there are a lot of people that would love to be in my position.
The breakneck pace of production in the Bakken is so great that employees are often not given the most basic information about the hazards they're exposed to. Brothers Jeremy Daggett and Brandon Belk worked for a company called Badlands Power Fuels, cleaning the inside of frac tanks for around $20 an hour.
Do you know what chemicals have been in that tank, or are you just jumping in and taking a guess?
You're just jumping in. You've got no clue. There should be an MSDS sheet for every tank that you jump into, material safety data sheet, which lets you know what chemical is in there and what you got to do if you're exposed to the chemical. None of those were ever provided.
What could be in a tank? You're at a place like Power Fuels, and they're like, go clean that tank. What are some of the common things that could be in a tank like that?
You know, it could be used for storage of oil. It could be used for storage of fresh water. It could be used for storage of salt water. I mean, the things that it could be are, you know, probably a dozen or more.
And of all those things, how many of them wouldn't be bad for you to go in and breathe?
I would say clean water. That would be the only one. I would not go into one of those tanks without a respirator, absolutely not.
Jeremy says that he and his brother Brandon asked for respirators from the safety office, but were never provided with any.
I went in one day and had a safety concern as far as washing tanks that had flowback in them. Flowback's like all the stuff that comes out of the earth when you're fracking. So I said, all this stuff is radioactive. It's probably cancer causing, you know? And then he was like, oh, well, do you smoke or do you chew? I was like, yeah, I chew. Well, that's more cancer causing than cleaning tanks are.
On July 3rd, 2013, Brandon took Jeremy's place, cleaning the inside of a tank, and let Jeremy take the easier job of going on a dispatch call.
I went on the dispatch and...
Why did he give you a spot?
Because he's a big brother. He'd do whatever he could to help me out in any way, and that's what he was doing that day.
Wow.
When Brandon came out of the tank 30 minutes later, Jeremy told us his brother vomited and passed out. His coworkers suffered respiratory problems and skin and eye irritation.
The next day is 4th of July. I got off work and we're all hanging out in the field, lighting off fireworks and everything like that. And I seen him and his face was swollen and his eyes were all puffy and his throat was bleeding. He'd take napkins and he'd go like this, pull it out, and there'd be blood on the end of it.
That night, Brandon went to the emergency room. The medical report from that evening states that he had pneumonia and a white area inside his mouth that appeared to be peeling.
My brother went home and he put on Facebook that he was scared to go to sleep and he didn't wake up the next day.
Brandon's autopsy report found that he had non-toxic doses of methadone and an antidepressant in his system. It attributed his death to a combination of drug overdose and pneumonia. Despite the autopsy report, Brandon's family believes that his death was work-related.
What do you think killed him?
I think it was the chemicals. I've never seen anybody's throat swell up or their whole entire face swell up the way that his did.
OSHA issued the company a citation for failing to test the space for hazardous atmospheric conditions, and another for failing to train their employees.
The company wasn't doing atmospheric testing. This is the very beginning of the safety program, especially with regard to confined space. You got to know what you're doing. You got to know what's in there.
The company was issued $17,000 in fines for multiple violations. Fines like these are one way that OSHA tries to keep companies in check across the Bakken.
What's the purpose of the fine?
Well, the purpose of a fine is to be a necessary deterrent effect. I mean, it's in its crudence and blatance term, to try to have a punitive effect on the employer. You know, it's really important to talk about dollar amount because there's no dollar amount that's the value of a lost person's life. If it's a serious violation, our statutory maximum is $7,000.
$7,000 isn't enough to have a punitive effect on employers that are making as much money as they are.
I would agree with you. Many of them, $7,000 probably does not seem like a lot. I really hope for most employers out there, it's certainly not the threat of an OSHA fine that drives your safety program.
If you know that you're not giving your employees the proper protective equipment, proper training, proper knowledge on what they're doing, and you've been told that you're not, and you continue not doing it, when somebody passes away, you should be held responsible for that.
Fatalities are the worst of what can happen in the oil fields. But there have been thousands of injuries. Between 2009 and 2013, North Dakota's Workforce Safety and Insurance Agency, known as WSI, received more than 9,000 claims from oil industry workers.
The consequences for serious, life-changing injuries and death are so minimal that it provides no incentive at all for these oil companies to clean up their act.
Steve Little is an attorney in Bismarck, North Dakota, who specializes in WSI cases.
Workers' compensation, not just in North Dakota, but everywhere, was created to prevent employees from suing their employers. And in exchange, the employee was supposed to get what's called sure and certain relief. That, I think, is where the bargain's been broken, frankly.
All right, Josh. All right, grab your poke. You grab that and that box, and I'll get the worms.
Yep, I got it.
One of Steve Little's cases involved Dennis Wedby, who was injured in the Bakken when there was a well blowout on an oil rig.
You can get it right out there, right in front, right there, yep.
Right there?
Yep.
Okay. Can you describe what you actually remember?
I remember pain. It's the worst pain I ever felt. And the whole time I was in hospital, I was always in pain. I'm still in pain. I'm in pain now. Yeah.
Without a job, Dennis was forced to move back to Pennsylvania to begin adjusting to life with one hand. His local doctor told him he would be a good candidate for something called a myoelectric prosthesis.
I was really excited about it, you know, because the founder of this hand has the same amputation as me.
What's he able to do with it?
Oh, you can tie your shoe, you can crack an egg, you can roll your dice, you can pour with it.
The prosthesis that Dennis wanted cost $70,000. He filed a claim for it with WSI. Companies pay premiums to WSI, and this pool of money is used to compensate injured workers.
He sent me in Minneapolis, flew me out there. I talked to this, about 15 minutes I talked to this doctor, 15 minutes.
In spite of what Dennis's local doctor recommended, the WSI-appointed doctor determined that Dennis was not a good fit for the prosthetic arm that he wanted.
I don't understand it. I don't. I didn't lose a hook, I lost a hand. I want a bionic hand.
Wedby appealed the WSI decision to North Dakota Supreme Court, but the court ruled in favor of WSI.
If you have an injured worker and you have a myoelectric arm or a hook that you could offer them, is it about the money?
You know, some of it, part of it has to do with cost.
Brian Clipfield is the director of WSI in North Dakota.
The other part is this going to benefit the injured worker in the job that they're going to? I mean,
but there's no one in the world that would ever argue that a hook would benefit a man better than a robotic arm. No. I mean, can you make that argument?
I don't think you can. But what I'm saying with the myoelectric arm, if you are going back to a job where you have dust and manufacturing environment, I think then it probably will not work, you know, as well as the hook will.
So do you ever return the money to the companies?
If we've had a better rate of return in our investments, then we do give back a premium dividend to our employers.
We found something on the website. I just want to make sure that this is factual. Maybe you can read that and tell me.
That's correct.
That is correct. Yep. $174 million went back to companies between 2005 2013.
If you look at, you know, from 2005, it's probably been about $750 million.
To go back to the companies?
Yep.
Whose interest is WSI actually serving?
I think if you're a large employer, if you're a politically connected employer, WSI is a good deal.
One of the things in this story that I want to understand is who's accountable.
The governor is statutorily in charge of workers' compensation in North Dakota.
It is now with great pride that I have the honor to introduce to all of you the governor of the great state of North Dakota, the Honorable Jack Dalrymple.
The governor is also chairman of the Industrial Commission, which can influence the pace of oil and gas development in the state through its permitting process.
I think legislators and the governor's office and the regulators are being influenced by oil money, you bet.
We should all be proud of the vital role our state is playing to help America strengthen its energy independence.
Fault Lines requested an interview with the governor several times with no success, so we've come to the Capitol in Bismarck to ask him about worker safety in the oil fields.
Hey, Governor, sorry to interrupt. I've come from Washington, D.C., though, and I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions. I host a show called Fault Lines.
You what?
I host a show called Fault Lines.
Fault Lines?
And we've been out in the Bakken, yeah. And I was curious why you didn't bring up worker safety in your speech today, and why you haven't done more. 40 guys have died out there in the last 4 years.
Well, we have to begin a receiving line right now, so I'm not going to have time to go into that with you. But
you can answer a question about that, though, right?
We have answers that we can provide.
I mean, 40 people have died out there. That's something that you could answer, right? Got to be important to you, right? Worker safety on the Bakken? I mean, at least for their families, tell them that you're interested. Come here. Gave the governor a chance to answer one question about worker safety on the Bakken and wouldn't do it.
The oil industry was the largest contributor to Governor Dalrymple in his 2012 gubernatorial race.
You think about 1, but 40, my God. I mean, this is terrible.
And for what?
So they can make more money.
More money. Name of the game.
Less than 6 weeks after Dustin was buried, another Neighbors Industries employee died on the job in North Dakota.
I just don't understand this continuing to happen. Like, how many people's got to lose their life for someone to finally open their eyes? Okay, we're doing something wrong here. Let's make it right. No, it's all about profit.
If jobs are going to keep producing as fast as they are, and money's just flying in, you know, as fast as it is, it's going to stay this way. There is no way people are going to slow things down. They keep drilling wells and keep adding on more rigs, and oil's producing and money's a flying. Nothing's going to happen. No way.